So oral history recording. So this is to support us recording people's memories as part of the project. So any questions, if I'm not explaining anything clearly enough, then just give me a shout and let me know. I've got some notes. I made a really crappy PowerPoint as well, so you don't have to just keep looking at my face, but the PowerPoint isn't great. So I apologize for that. So yeah, let me just see if I can. That's not very big. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes, see.
I tried to make it more fun by making some of the words pink, but I feel like that's not really added anything to it.
You
okay,
just
cool.
got to be really powerful about it. I mean, just tell people how great it is.
Okay.
Because
it's really detailed.
Excellent.
Okay. Okay, so I have some notes. I'm going to read through everything. It might be a little dry. I will try and make it a bit more fun for everyone. So oral history is, as you can see on the screen, it's to be official, it's a recorded account. It's a person's own lived experience, so an individual's own experience. They tend to be at length and quite in depth, and that intended for archiving. So this is where ours are going to slightly differ in that, because we're looking very project specific at the history of the venue rather than of people's particular history. We're doing more of an oral story rather than an oral history. So it's very similar, obviously. It's being recorded and transcribed, hoping that they'll go to the local studies library. It just means that they're not going to be as lengthy and in depth. It's not about a person's whole life. It's about a particular experience or kind of encounter with the venue, and that might be multiple encounters. You know, they might have worked there, and it will be a bit longer than someone, say, who's just been to see a film and it's kind of really stuck with them. But just wanted to kind of like just highlight how ours will be slightly different to the kind of more standard lengthy personal accounts. So recording oral histories is really like really interesting subject. So it's all about uncovering lost voices that are not reflected in traditional archives. So I think a lot of times people rely on written accounts, so letters, diaries, etc. Whereas with a oral history, it's a first person testimony about a period in time, or about how things used to be done. And sometimes in my training, this is how it was told to me. It was the people whose like books and letters and diaries are kind of like often kept and referenced, perhaps of a different class or standing in society than people whose verbal accounts are. So it's kind of making sure that everyone has an equal kind of footing in the history books, which again kind of gives different perspectives on different periods in history. So, you know, you might have a diary written by a landowner that gives you an account of a certain time in history, but the accounts, they're like the personal accounts of the people that worked there would be completely different and have a completely different viewpoint. By recording things orally, you get a placement of emphasis that you wouldn't have in written accounts. So that's very important. Like where you place the emphasis verbally is like different than if you were writing that down, say. And again, it kind of in a similar way, the dialect and phraseology that is captured in an oral, like a verbal account, is much different. You probably do the same thing that I do. Like when you're writing something, you kind of omit words that you might say, or phrase, you know, like how you might phrase something. You kind of revert a bit more to Queen's English if you're writing it down, whereas if you're speaking it out loud, it kind of comes out differently. Sorry. Yeah. So sense of empowerment is quite interesting in terms of, again, kind of giving people the right and the space to share their stories, things that perhaps people haven't, you're not going to just kind of like willingly like give your personal history to someone, but like being able to humanize that history is a really interesting way of kind of looking at history differently. Also, another interesting thing, so when I kind of talked about placement of emphasis, you see where people emphasize things, if it's verbal. It's also quite it's also more emotional. You can see or hear a person's emotions in a verbal account, whereas again in a written account it's much more matter of fact, and you can't, it's very difficult unless you're like looking at someone's handwriting and it starts to like waver slightly, and you're probably not going to know like what they're thinking or what they're feeling at that time. So these are all reasons why historians and oral historians record oral histories, and they kind of do this for a huge range of different projects. So projects like ours, where you're kind of like looking into quite specific local history, or researchers who are looking into the history of a specific area, or I know like the Leeds University, they do like oral projects on dialect all over the country, and all kinds of like different things. So it kind of has its place in like all different areas of research and historical research. So that's kind of like the background. I'm just going to see if I had any other notes on the back. In my training that I did, they kind of talked about things that were similar to oral history but are not the same. So they touched a little bit on reminiscence events, which are very much kind of like verbal sharing of stories and memories, but are usually done in quite specific settings, like related to like dementia or things like that. So are different in that they're not recorded, and they're not about kind of collecting a history. It's more about sharing. And they also mentioned journalism in terms of like interviews and things. So in interviews, you're often recording a conversation, and you're often recording a conversation that's something very specific, but it's not used in the same way, and it doesn't become a historical like document that like an oral history would do. I mean, to be fair, it does become a historical document, because if it's published in the newspaper, we're going to go find it in the National Newspaper Archive. So, it does end up there eventually.
That's necessarily edited, isn't it, Abby? That's the difference, really.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it tends to be with the oral histories, you're not editing that person's account, or sorry, and again with the longer form ones that we won't be doing, it's very much about rather than asking questions, just kind of prompting the interviewee to talk about specific things, and getting them to kind of just recount as much as possible without you intervening too much. So then it kind of goes into more specific things. So I've got setting up the interviews. So this kind of like comes from if you're working on like a wide oral history project, but also kind of relates to our memory recording. So you would identify people who you would like to speak to. So I want to go through some of the kind of like the more wider stuff, because then hopefully then if you go on to work on other projects like this, you'll have a bit more of the kind of the wider picture. So let me just refer to my notes again. Yeah. So if you're working on a oral history project specifically, there's all kinds of things that you'd be looking to do in setting up the interviews. We'll be simplifying that with our project, but I'm just going to run through a few of the bigger things, and then we can talk about our project specifically. So there's kind of like really practical stuff that you would need to do beforehand in terms of completing a risk assessment before conducting an interview. That's just to make sure that everybody is safe, yourself and the interviewee included. You might want to advertise that you're looking for people to come forward and be interviewed. So we're obviously doing that through our call out, and we'll be specifically inviting people in for the in-person events in the gallery. But I think we'll also widen that if anyone can't attend on those specific dates, that they might be able to pop in and meet someone from the project and do it on another date. So you've got to be aware of where you're putting that advert and what you're asking people to come forward to take part in. So again, we'll talk about that with our project like in a bit more detail. Considering the location, so we'll be hosting the majority of them in the gallery. So it'll be a case of finding a location that doesn't have traffic noise and has good acoustics. But if you were, say, to do this as part of another project and you were looking to do the interviews, those are kind of like the same considerations. You'd want to make sure that you're finding a suitable place. And that also means like somewhere warm, somewhere comfortable for you to kind of like to sit. Because if you're, talking to someone for an hour, you don't want to be on like a hard wooden chair with no back in a cold room. So yeah, it's quite important. Quite important. So things like having notice in the building, say recording in progress, seems really simple, but we've had events in the gallery where we've been, have had like a live stream in the gallery talk, and someone's forgot to put the signs up, and then you just kind of got people shouting in the background or slamming doors because, there's nothing to kind of notify people that something is happening. So yeah, I put it in because I was like, it might be quite simple again, but it's one of those things that can make a really big difference. And say, for example, if you're working on an oral history project for another project, it's just one of those things to kind of consider if you were doing it in a different location as well. So this is my research about the subject. So the subject being the person you're speaking to. So if we've got people coming in off the street, as it were, for our scan-a-thon workshops, and we're probably not going to know much about them in advance, but it would be a case of having a chat with someone before you kind of like went into recording them. So you're not just going in there going, oh, and what's your name? And what's your memory? You have a bit of a chat about it before going into the actual recording. And again, if you're working on a different project, this might be you're doing a call out, you speak to the person on the phone, find out a bit about them before going to record the actual oral history. And again, so location, most people are most relaxed in their own homes. We probably won't be doing that in terms of our recordings. I just thought it was worth mentioning again for future reference, but it is something in terms of being relaxed and making sure that person feels comfortable. So when we look to do them in the gallery, we'll find like a nice space in which to do them. So it might be that we borrow the office space where it's a bit warmer, a bit quieter. So there, something to consider. But I think before we do those scan-a-thon workshops, we might have a walk around the building together and kind of just identify what we think is like the most comfortable place to do them. Permissions are quite important. Seems like a bit of unnecessary admin, but if you're going to be using the words and the personal accounts of another person, then you have to get the permission to do so. They're quite, they'd be probably quite happy to speak to you anyway, But if we were then to use that, say in the exhibition or in an archive, we need to have their permission to do so. So it might be that they, you know, they kind of like go through everything, do the recording, and then go, oh, actually, you know, I don't have this included. You know, they'd be happy enough just to have a chat. I don't want to include it. That's obviously fine. But if the person is happy to have their recording collected and used, then we just need their written permission to do that. So that's something that is on my list for next week to look at, just drafting a really simple permission form that says what the recording will be used for, how long we'll be keeping that. So I'll share that with everyone next week to have a read through before we kind of like go into doing any recordings. Another funny one, but probably quite one of those like secret important ones, was dress appropriately. Don't want to be kind of like just really distracting someone because you're wearing a t-shirt with a swear word on and it's making the person uncomfortable, or yeah, I have no idea what else might make someone uncomfortable. But just bearing in mind that you're talking to a stranger and they might have different style choices to you. So just being comfortable and polite, just makes a big difference. And then again, testing the equipment ahead of time. So we have equipment here that we'll be using. So I'll show you this a little bit later on as well. So an audio recorder, lapel mics on here. So that'll be something that we'll do before any recording takes place in the gallery. Sorry. So we'll probably do a test, make sure the batteries are charged, make sure everything's working, and just to remember to do that before we start doing anything. I'm just going to cough again. I do apologize. Sorry, I don't know where this cough is coming. So, any questions so far? It's boring but interesting, hopefully. Okay, so that's all the kind of like pre-setup, and then hopefully the more interesting part is actually speaking to someone, kind of like getting that moving. So beginning the recording. So again, you'll have one of these, which is pretty simple and easy to use. But what I was thinking is I'll go through it really kind of badly by Zoom, but then before we do anything, we'll have a go at using them in the gallery between ourselves. I do apologize for that. So, starting the recording. On the recorders that we have that I don't know, it's really dark, isn't it? They have a internal memory card. Yeah, it just goes in here. So it records onto a memory card, much like a camera. So we'll be recording onto that. And they're like so simple to use in that you literally just turn it on for this one. And then you will see, you see that? So I'm going to press record just so you can see it moving. So if it's flashing, it's not recording yet. It's kind of showing you like the sound levels. So you can see it moving backwards and forwards as I'm talking. You can see that it's picking up the sound. And then if I press record again, got a solid light here. And then you can see the levels going up and down here so that you know it's recording. So I'm just going to stop that.
Abby, can you tell me what it's called? Because there may be a YouTube video on how to use it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's a Tascam. Tascam.
CAM.
Yeah, and then the model number is DR and then a dash.
Right.
And then 07.
07.
and then it says MK2, so it must be Mark 2.
Right. I'm sure there'll be a video how to use it.
If you can find that and pop it in, that'd be great, because I've just been
Right,
messing
I'll
around
find
with
it,
it. So that's kind of like, that's how you would begin. And then what you'd want to do with your interviewee is, again, a lot of it is just really simple, but it's just remembering to do this. And what we'll do is we'll kind of just do like a crib sheet as well for everyone, because I need to kind of just make sure I'm doing all the steps. So sure everyone's the same. So you'd ask if they could hear you. And if they can't hear you, what would help? Whether it's just speaking a little louder. Sometimes it's not speaking louder, it's speaking slowly. Try and be a bit more clear with the words that you're using, depending on everyone's different levels of comfort and things. So like at the beginning of the Zoom, everyone always just said, "Can you hear me? You need to be turning up." So just do a similar thing to make sure that they're comfortable, they can hear you, hear what you're saying, you can hear them. And again, just making sure that the sound levels are showing that it's actually picking up in the recorder. There we go. The oral histories, if you're doing the long form ones, they can often take a couple of hours. I think with our ones, they'll probably be shorter than that, because we're looking, like I said, at kind of more contained specific memories. But it is still important probably to say that people could take a break whenever they like. You might be talking to them for 10 minutes, you might be talking to them for half an hour, but just to make sure that people know that they can take a break. And if you wanted to take a break because they want to get a drink or just want to stand up or nip to the loo, you just press the record button and it pauses it, and then you'll be able to go back to the recording again afterwards. But it's kind of, a lot of the stuff is just making sure that whoever you're speaking to feels confident and feels comfortable speaking to you. So it's just the kind of nicety saying, take a break whenever you want, just let me know. So they don't feel that they're kind of like being held to like a specific time frame.
I think it's also explaining beforehand how it's going to work and what equipment you're using and that sort of thing. Just kind of makes a level of equality as well between the two of you, so that they know it's not like, oh, I'm just going to do something technical now, don't worry about it. It's just kind of, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how we record it, so it's like you say that thing there about, if I look down I'm still listening. It's kind of maintaining a two-way communication, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you kind of like jump to the next one. So it's like just letting them know that if you're taking notes, it's not because you're like, again, like recording them like twice. It's just, if you look down, you're still listening. It's just making them aware of how it works, so they don't feel uncomfortable. Where it says give a green light for them to give their version of events, that basically kind of refers to, like, say for example, if we're speaking to someone who was at a Beatles concert back in the Gaumont era, there will be like a public version of that event that the newspaper coverage, there's kind of basically the amount of that people have spoken about it kind of creates like a version of events that people kind of like confirmed, like said, that's what's happened because that's what the community says is what happened. But to give a green light for their version, if they were there, you don't want them to just kind of like recount that same kind of like stamped seal of approval version. Like you want to hear from their perspective what happened, or from their perspective what their experience was. So it's not just a repetition, it's more of that personal account. So I'm not quite sure how you would phrase that, but yeah, it's just kind of bear that in mind while speaking to people. And again, another example is something that we've heard quite a lot about already is the Star Wars screening with the mirror ball. So there's kind of like a version of that event where people have kind of said, this is what's happened. But if we're speaking to someone who is kind of like new to this, we don't just want to kind of have that kind of like same bland story. We want their kind of like personal account. Okay, and then a bit more specific is at the beginning of the recording, give your name. As the interviewer, ask for their name and ask them to spell it. The date and the year that you're doing the recording, and when and where the interview is taking place. So these are just things that for the oral history, it kind of, you know, it's like the project details, kind of like helps create that historical record. So yeah, so the name of the project as well. I probably got those in the wrong order. It should be their name, where they were born and when, and then the date and the year and when and where the project is taking place. So I apologize. I will change those around. So they
and
make
again,
sense.
are you going to have a crib for that as well? Just a little card, so that
Yeah, a reminder.
I mean, in one sense, it's just a hi. I just need to ask you this, so we can, record all the stories in the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
And they know what you're doing again.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I'll make a crib sheet for this. And again, yeah, it's like you say, it's also said they're all the same. So not so all the memories are the same, but so each recording kind of becomes part of that historical document in the same way with the same details, which is great. So that's you starting. And then during the interview, so the fun part when you're actually talking to people about their memories. So from the oral history point of view, they advise not having a list of questions, like, you know, really direct questions that were like, oh, what was the weather like on that day? Things like that, but having subject headings that you want to explore. So so you're not kind of like leading people down a specific path. It's more about them sharing with you what they think is important. I think for us, in terms of the memories, it might be that we want to be a bit more specific because we're trying to find out about their experiences in a specific place. So that's something that I kind of thought it might be interesting to talk about, but maybe we'll kind of do that at the end when we've gone through the rest of the information. So yeah, they suggest if you're doing the kind of like the long form oral history of someone's life, having a topic list as a checklist rather than a kind of list of really specific questions that you've already planned in advance, and then, you know, not as adaptable to the things that might come out of a conversation. So yeah, so letting the interview talk about what is important to them. So they might be talking about the time they came to the venue and they saw the first screening of Star Wars, but they might want to focus on the nice popcorn that they had because they really remember what it tasted like and what the packaging looked like, rather than seeing the mirror ball. Or they might talk about seeing the mirror ball and not mention kind of anything about the film or the decor or who was there with them, but, you know, it's their memory and it's their memory of the building, so it's what's important to them. And you can obviously kind of prompt to find out a little bit more around the edges of that, obviously, but not stifling what they want to say or cutting them off. So yeah, so that could be, it's kind of like it's not what you do in like a regular conversation. It's what they taught us about in the training. It's because when we're kind of like having a regular conversation with someone, you are constantly interrupting, cutting across, stopping them talking about one thing because you want to find out about another thing. So you kind of have to like, kind of just go into it in a completely different frame of mind for how you want to talk to that person. A reminder that closed questions invite short answers. So a closed question would be something that someone would just say yes or no to. I'm trying to think of an example now. I should have written an example down, but I can't think of anything. It might be, did you go to that? And they say yes. That's not very interesting. So closed questions can be useful if you're trying to like dig down into something and trying to find out a little bit more about something, and you go slowly before you get to a bigger question or a bigger answer. But yeah, closed questions probably for what we want to do, not the most helpful, because they won't kind of express the memories and the kind of like recollections in the same way. So an open question will invite a longer answer, such as tell me about, or tell me more about something. So you're inviting them to kind of, you're inviting them to talk about what's important to them, and kind of tell you about what they think is important. And it might be that you start with an open question, and then you can use closed questions to, like I said, like dig down more into it. So you say, tell me about your first okay. You might say, yeah, tell me about the first time you went into the farm rodeo. And they would say, oh, the first time I went was when it was the Go Hunt, and we went to see the Rolling Stones, and it was really great, and I got my ticket signed afterwards. And then you'll say, oh, can you tell me more about what the concert was like, and they'll say, oh, there was so many people there, you couldn't hear anything because everyone was just screaming and shouting. And then see how far you get with that. And then you might go to closed questions to find out specific details. I'm going to cough again. Yeah, so like it says underneath, finish with more closed questions to get more detail. So that might be asking about who they were there with, what do they remember about what the building looked like, what time it finished, etc. Kind of getting those smaller details that might not come about in a more open response. And then quite importantly, saying before we move on, is there anything you would like to say about this? So there might be something that you didn't think was relevant, or has kind of just come to mind while talking about something. As often happens, you might have been talking about something for 10 minutes, and it's not until the very end that you go, oh, actually, I got my ticket signed at the end, or we actually met them outside the venue beforehand or something. So sorry. So just giving people the space and the opportunity to add anything on that they might want to. Sorry. So let me just see if there's anything else. Some questions. Yeah, so just some other kind of notes that I took. I just kind of like general notes really. So don't rush. Don't want to put someone not ill at ease, but you don't kind of like put someone off because you're trying to rush through. I'm so sorry. Gosh, I don't know where this is coming from. Again, another kind of like more specific thing that might be useful. And again, when we do them in the building, we can go, like I say, we'll go around and we'll identify a good area together. But sitting a reasonable distance apart, so you're not kind of encroaching on someone's personal space, especially if it's someone you've kind of only just met, could really put someone off and not make them as open as you want them to be. And this is another one kind of in the same vein. Don't directly face them, which might seem a bit of an odd one, but again, if it's someone you kind of just met and you wanted them to be quite open, if you're just staring at them in the face, it can be a little off-putting. So if you kind of like, this is something we'll go through when we set up the space together, kind of like just slightly off, as if you like, have two armchairs pointing at the TV, they're just slightly slightly at an angle. And again, it's just all kind of like tips about making the person you're speaking to feel as comfortable as possible. And then another one in the same vein. So this is something that we'll, like I say, we'll do together, but useful to know if you're going to go on to do more oral histories in the future. Not having a light source directly behind you. So you're not kind of like giving them some kind of like Spanish Inquisition. And also so you can clearly see each other. So the lighting here is not great. I know it kind of like goes on and off, which is not brilliant. So again, it's just making sure that you and the person you're speaking to could see each other clearly, much like being able to hear each other clearly, like we kind of mentioned at the beginning. And they might seem like silly things, but again, if you want to get a really nice, open, positive recollection from someone that you're going to record and hopefully use, and is not stunted, it's not awkward, because you don't want to listen back to something that's awkward or uncomfortable. So you just want to make sure that that setting is as comfortable as possible. So all these kind of little tips hopefully kind of all go into making a good recording at the end of the day. Another one that I think is quite useful, I probably should have included in here, is always wait until the person you're speaking to has fully finished before following up. So again, like I said, in a normal conversation, we just kind of start talking when we think the person is finished, but it means that we're always like talking at the end of each other's sentences, which in normal conversation is fine because we kind of accept that. But if we're recording that, it's going to make it very difficult to listen back to transcribe. And if we were using that in an archive or in the exhibition, then it's going to be a bit of a cluttered recording. So always making sure that you wait for someone to finish the end of the sentence, give it a pause to make sure that they've stopped, and then kind of follow up from there. And sometimes people, like in conversation, especially if you're like thinking about something or trying to remember something, you might actually pause like mid-sentence and then carry on because you're still processing, you're still thinking. So just making sure that you don't, just kind of start talking in that pause is quite important as well. Let's have a look. Is there anything else I noted down and didn't add on? I think this might come into I think I might cover this at the end, but just in case I haven't popped it in, I'll just say, just to play back the recording before the person leaves, just so they know that you've got it captured, and so you know they've got it, you've got it recorded before they leave. So again, just a kind of like important one. But I'll put, again, if we make the crib sheet, I'll add that on there as well. You don't want to have been chatting to someone for half an hour and then they say bye and they leave, and then you kind of go to listen back to it and it's not there for any reason, and you're like, no, they've just left and they've gone to Costa and I can't get them back.
So Abby, are you suggesting playing back the whole interview to them, or just checking that there's something at the beginning and at the end?
Yeah, just checking that there's something there. If it's a half an hour conversation, you don't need to listen back to it, but just playing it and hearing you go, hi, my name is Abby, I'm here with, and they give that, just so you know that you've got that recording safely on there. And then if there are any issues, like you've got loads of feedback or it's kind of intimate or just anything, it's flagged up immediately. And then it might be that you ask if they're happy to re-record it, or we have to do something with the equipment and something we can look at. Okay, so that's at the beginning. These were just some good, so apparently I didn't write down any example of code questions, which is silly, but these are some good examples of kind of like prompting questions to get more information. So again, I'll pop these on the crib sheet because they're quite useful, because sometimes you want to ask more, but I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but it takes me a while to think of something. So if I have like some examples, it's quite easy to rephrase them into the context that I need. So again, so examples of things. So if you're talking to someone about, the Rolling Stones playing or seeing, winning at bingo or something. Why is it doing this? Sorry, my mouse is now playing up and moving things without me even touching it. So examples of trying to get more information. So you can rephrase these as required, depending on the context of what you're talking about. But things like what was going through your head at the time, so that might be rephrased as what were you thinking about, or what did that make you think about? How did you feel about that? Or what were you feeling at the time? And then what's that? Okay, so that was quite an oral history related one. So for example, if you were talking about work or something, it might be, is that how you feel now or how you felt at the time? Because sometimes our feelings or opinions of things change over time. So you want to find out. So if they give you a specific opinion or feeling, did they feel like that then 20 years ago? Or do they feel like that now looking back at that time? So it's quite a good one. This is going to make a good recording for everyone, is it? Just watching me cough. I apologise to everyone rewatching this. Okay, now it's working. So equipment. So this is, again, I kind of put all the information in, and so then hopefully if you do go on to do more oral histories in the future, it's kind of like a bit more background information. But I kind of like already flashed to you what we're using. So from an oral history point of view, there's kind of like two recorders they use. This one called the Zoom H5 or a Tascam. We have a Tascam. But I think they work in much the same way. They will be a small handheld device with a memory card here. And then they have these inbuilt microphones, but it's kind of advised not to rely on these. They're not very good quality, which is why we have these lapel microphones here. So again, this is having two power sources is like a backup. And then if, say, for example, you're working on a project in the future where you're going to someone's home to make a recording, you'd want to take have batteries that are fully charged, plus a power bank that you would plug in. So if for any reason your batteries or anything kind of like cut out, you're still able to go through the recording. I think in terms of being in the gallery and working together, it's probably not as big of an issue. That's kind of more on me to make sure it's charged and make sure there's some backup batteries. But I just kind of wanted to like flag that up. So the recorders WAV files, not MP3. So WAV files, I don't know if anyone's into music like my dad, they're like the highest quality ones that you can get. So they're not compressed at all. So it's like having an original copy, whereas an MP3 is a much, it's like having like a photocopy or something, you know, it's kind of like a compressed, condensed file. So we'll make those for sharing, because I think at the end, you always say, send a copy to the person that we've spoken to. But in terms of for the archive and for the exhibition, we'll want WAV files. So I think this should be set up to record in WAV, but I will double check. So the Oral History Society recommend lapel mics. I have an example here. I might not unbind it all actually, because then I have to wind it back. So a lapel mic is these little triangles. You click on. I'm going to come again. And basically with using a lapel mic, you can get it, it's more, directional is not really the right word, but it means you can get it close to the person you're speaking to. So, example, if you were, interviewing me, I don't know if you noticed, I've got quite a quiet, quite low voice. So with the lapel mic, you could get it as close as possible, so you could get a good recording. It also means that you don't have a massive microphone in front of someone that, again, can be quite off-putting. So again, it's about making someone feel comfortable. And also they give like a good recording quality as well. So we have some in the gallery that we'll be using. And again, we'll go through all the tech side of stuff in person, and we'll do a run through ahead of actually doing it with members of the public. So don't worry if I was kind of like rushing through it. And Adrian, if you wanted to look these up as well, that would be ace. So what is this? So these are dual head microphones. And it says they're made by Comica, Comica. And the model is CVM D, I think it's D02 rather than D02. But
they sell them on Amazon.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Cool.
Well, they sell everything on Amazon.
They do. That's why Jeff Bezos can buy a massive.
Right, I've got that, yeah.
All right, cool. So some kind of like key things with the lapel mics is to have it so when just zip is to make sure when clipping it on that it's like kind of like really sticking out rather than like touch it. This is black on my black jumper, so you can't really see anything, but basically don't have it like touching the material, because you'll get that, like if you're watching the news and you can hear someone and it's just rustle, which is really annoying. So yeah, so just making sure that it's kind of stuck out away from the material. So the machine's recording stereo. So again, we'll run through that in person. And so it's recording from the lapel mics, not the internal microphones. So they plug in here at the top in the mic or extension in. So we'll run through that. This is just kind of making you aware of all the different kind of elements. Set the levels, which I showed you on here. I think it's really loud. Stop there. I think I went through this earlier. So the flashing red lights, right, means it's registering the sound, so you can check that it's that the sound's coming in, but it's not recording. So you press it again to get the solid red light, and then you have the recording. It's going to be like a million like little snippets of me saying something random. Oh, I think we've lost Adrian. I'm going to watch that. Hopefully it pops back in, but I'll kind of just carry on in the meantime. So they also advise having when I say they, I mean the Oral History Society, a mini speaker to plug in to do a little sound check. So I think we might look at that. So when you play it back to someone, there is a line out here. So you could just plug in one of those teeny tiny mini speakers, just so when you're playing it back, it doesn't sound tinny and like my voice like a little mouse. But it's not really important. And then, yeah, the archive copy should be untouched, so that's the WAV file. so we can leave that as it is, so it's not compressed and it's the original recording. And then we'll create a copy to edit. So if we want to, for the exhibition, if we think actually we just want this 2-minute snippet, we'll kind of like take that out of a copy, and yeah, send in a copy to the interviewee so they can listen to it. And yeah, just basically being polite and saying thank you very much for your time and sharing the methods. See when can I go down? Yes. Oh no, there's one to send. It's going on. Okay. After the interview, so you said, is there anything else you would like to tell me? And they say, no, I think that's everything. So thank you very much. In terms of being a full oral history of someone's life story, again, that's kind of like slightly different from the slightly shorter versions that we're doing for this project. But again, I kind of wanted to include all the information just so you have it for future reference. So if someone wants to remain anonymous, that's obviously perfectly fine. We'll need them to sign the permission form with their name and contact details. But I'll include a checkbox on there. So if someone is quite happy for their recording contribution to be included, but they just prefer, for whatever personal reason they have, to not have their name, in the exhibition, they can opt in or out of that. So that's not an issue. This one is more for the second point is more for the long form oral histories. So they're probably not as relevant to our project, but worth knowing. The person that you're speaking to, the interviewee, can place limitations on the recording. So you just need to ask them what those were. So it might be that they're happy for it to go into the archive as the full account, but they say, but in terms of exhibiting that or making publicly accessible, it might be that they only want, say, the bit where they talk about their childhood, or there might be just a small section. Hi Adrian, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. I think all of a sudden, I'm on Virgin and they do their work in their afternoon and they keep cutting us off. Unfortunately, yeah. We'll have to have a nighttime session. Yeah, I'm back anyway. Hey.
Cool. Okay, so we were just talking about after the interview. So obviously you say you kind of go, is there anything else you want to add? And they say, no, they've said everything. Say thank you. Thank you for your time. We're just saying that people can remain anonymous if they wish, if they're happy for their recording to be included and used, but they just would prefer their name not to be on it. That's obviously completely fine. And we'll have that on the permission form they sign. And we were just saying about placing limitations on recordings, which will be more relevant to kind of the full long form oral histories that we're not doing with the project. But it's just worth knowing, that they might say completely happy for the full thing to go into an archive, but would prefer that in the exhibition or to be made public accessible, we don't use that bit. It's just this bit. Again, which is completely fine. They just need to detail what that is, and either you make a note of it or they make a note on their permission form.
So Abby, I guess we need to then, when we're setting up the interview and talking to people right at the start, say what the purposes are, that we're planning to place the recordings in an archive for one thing, and secondly, perhaps to use all or part of them in an exhibition, so that they are fully aware of what they're committing to, and at that time say, if you're happy for it to go into the archive, that's fine. If you're happy for it to be in the exhibition, that's fine. But if there's anything you don't want to be shared with the public, then let us know.
It's probably you're probably right. That it's probably best to do that at the beginning, and then just remind them at the end as well. They might at the beginning say, "Oh no, it's completely fine. Please use everything," but then they kind of say something part way through that they're like, "Oh, I don't actually want my mum to know that. please don't make that bit public. Yeah, and they can make a note of it. So yeah, I made a note and I'll put that on the flip it around and do it at the beginning. Oh, and then again, this one, the last point is if you're working on a different project. So with our project, we're already in touch with the local studies library. But if you were, say, doing a oral history project in the future, making contact with an archive ahead of doing the recording, so kind of like at the beginning of your project planning, to see if they have space, to see if they're happy to collect that, because it might be that specific archives have kind of like remits that they work to. So what you're recording might not fit within one archive, but it might fit within another one. And also in terms of the specifics that they need, because some archives will take the WAV files, but they'll only want a transcript, or some of them might want a summary, or they might, and it also will reflect on the data that you need to record from your participants as well. So again, that's kind of just a future reference one. So it also reminds you that I need to follow up with the studies library about what they need before we kind of get cracking. So note to myself to do that. Then I've just got a little note on transcribe and summary, because this is something that we'll be doing afterwards. So the difference between the two is that, and you probably already know this, but I wasn't quite aware of the differences, so I thought it'd be useful to pop in. And that a transcription is an accurate version of what they said. So full transcription needs to be exact. Whereas, and then this is where it gets a bit funny, because I've done transcriptions before, and when I first started doing them, it's like, if you haven't done it, it's very confusing, because people talk, like people's grammar when they speak is awful. And probably whoever's like watching this back will really realize it's your sentences make no sense. You think you've said something and you haven't, you completely just omitted certain words. You've repeated yourself like a million times. So when you do a transcription that's exact, even like the most, see, I can't even think of a sentence now. So transcribing this would be awful. Yeah, unless it's like a kind of like carefully crafted lecture or speech, that transcription is going to look a mess, basically. So just bearing that in mind. So again, this was a little note that I thought was useful. When they do the brackets, it means words. Oh, why is it doing this? I'm sorry, my mouse is going really silly. The square brackets means words that were not said, but we think were intended. So I think you often see that in journalism, you often see those closed brackets. So yeah, so it's just kind of, we'll go through this again once we've done some recordings and we're kind of at this point, but I just thought it would be worth kind of noting now, because this is like the full process. Captions were, yeah, so for captions you want edited text is referring to when we do the exhibition, depending on how we display the oral histories. If we're having a caption, whether in vinyl on the wall or whether in a, say, like a exhibition guide about the oral stories, we'll want to edit the text. So and that should include a disclaimer about editing. So basically, if we included an exact copy, an exact transcription for that caption, again, it would, if someone read that back, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, really, if you were like reading it as opposed to hearing it, because of the way people emphasize, the way people pause, etc., etc. So we would edit those then to use in the exhibition. So it's just a reminder to us that that will be a process that we're going through. And I'm going to cough again. So then a summary is different. So summary is not a full a full copy of what is said verbally. A summary lists the topics and the subtopics and acts like an index. So it's as it kind of like says on the tin, it's a summary of what is said. So it might be that you would say, you're speaking to, so I only keep saying about the Rolling Stones because someone came in yesterday with their like Rolling Stones tickets. And so it's kind of like in my head. But yeah, you would list that they talk about the concert. They in the subtopics they talk about who they went to the concert with, and meeting the Rolling Stones. You know, like it would kind of like list really generally the different areas that they talk about in that conversation. So then the archive can then look at that summary and go, oh, in this one, so and so talks about Rolling Stones. It also mentions the venue. It also mentions whatever else happens. So it's a much simpler version. And I think what we will probably want to do is do really simple summaries after each conversation, just so we know we can group them. You know, it might be that we then end up with a group of conversations that are about the Coleman and the concerts, and there's a group about the Odeon and the films, and then we can go back through and work out which ones we want to transcribe and use at a later date. So I'm just going to check back at my notes and see if there's anything that I've missed, but please do ask any questions. Okay.
By the way, I've joined you on the mobile. I don't trust Virgin anymore.
Good to know that you're adaptable.
Makes me look more then. Yeah. Carry on, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just scanning through my notes to see if there's anything that I've missed that would be useful to know. Something that I didn't mention, but might be quite evident anyway, but hang on, I'm stop screen sharing. There we go. The recording is obviously oral, so the people listening back to it, the people in the exhibition, you when you're transcribing it, there's going to be no visual clues. And obviously while we're talking to people, we give a lot of visual clues that are not going to be picked up with microphones. So even just when I'm talking to you now, I'm kind of like smiling, I'm like moving my head around, I'm using my hands. You guys might be kind of sat there going, you know, like in agreement on something. It's worth bearing in mind again that it's not a regular conversation. So like I said earlier, it's much different to when you're just chatting to someone and you kind of inadvertently speak over someone or kind of pause someone to talk about something else. It's also that, you know, the microphone isn't going to see me doing this with my hands or moving my head around. So kind of all those visual clues will not be there. So what was I going to say about that? But kind of like counter to that, we want to hear what your interviewee has to say, not necessarily what we want to contribute. So trying to like give non-verbal encouragement is kind of a key thing. So it might be, you know, smiles and nods are the kind of things we do like politely anyway, but to show that you're actively listening and want them to continue, but isn't going to then kind of interrupt the recording with you, you know, kind of interjecting little words. Oh, and also, this is like a silly one, but I thought this the other day in that, depending on how we set up the room, and again, we'll, like I said, we'll go through that all together, but when I was doing a test one with just a colleague the other day, we were doing it on the desk and, you know, had a glass of water, and every time I like picked it up and put it down, it didn't sound like anything at the time, but the back on the recording, all you could hear was this like clunk, 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 like intermittently. So this is, yeah, just a silly little thing, but we'll obviously want to offer people refreshments and beverages. So I think just to kind of like bear in mind, I might put this on the crib sheet so you don't forget, it's like have a coaster or something like soft, you know, like it's kind of all these like, because we're usually more focused on things being visual, the oral things that we don't often think about. So yeah, again, just to kind of like bear that in mind. I didn't need such a long explanation. I don't know why I did that. Oh yeah, if you do need to interrupt someone for any reason while they're speaking, try not to do that verbally. Try not to kind of like cut across someone. It might be that you you know, potentially, you know, raise your hand gently to kind of indicate that you would like to say something, which then lets them kind of come to the end of their sentence or their thought process before addressing that. So again, just making sure that they remain comfortable while speaking is something to be aware of. I don't think this would, again, will be an issue with what we're talking to people about, but non-judgmental responses. You know, they might say that they went to see the Beatles and it was rubbish, and you know, they've never listened to them since. It's not our job to be like, are you crazy? They're one of the most important bands of all time. You just go, is that how you felt then? Oh no. Yeah, you don't let them know what you're thinking, basically. You don't want to argue with anyone. Okay. Oh, and then another one, kind of like following on from that. Dealing with objectionable views. I don't think this is something that will necessarily come up with what we're talking about with people, but again, you know, we'll be speaking to all different members of the public. You never know how anyone is going to react to something or what they might say. So just kind of, you know, it might be that you very gently question like why they are saying something, or without being too judgmental or arguments. Talked about neutral. Oh, okay. This is a useful one. So it might be that you want to summarize something that someone said, just to kind of see if they've mentioned everything that they would like to or they thought they've said. And it also kind of like helps you reflect on that before perhaps coming up with another question or prompt that you want to find out a little more about. So for example, I kind of noted down like an example would be, so from what you said, it sounds as though you went to see the Rolling Stones and you thought it was great, but could you tell me a little bit more about how you got to the venue at that point? Like, you know, that's a really boring question. It's the first thing that came to mind, but you know, you kind of like summarize a little bit what they've said, so then you can lead on to something else. And also ask for explanations. So yeah, so you might be wanting to interrupt because you might want to say, oh, can I just ask you, like, you said so and so, what does that mean? Because they might, yeah, they'll be colloquial, how do you say that? They'll be like slang words. They'll be like, you know, they might mention a band that supported the Beatles in the 60s and no one has ever heard of. You might, you might want to just ask for an explanation every now and again as to what something is or where something was. because you might know. But if you think about that, the people coming to see the exhibition and find out about the history of the venue are not necessarily going to know everything. So yeah, I don't think that you can ask for an explanation. See if there's anything else. I think I've said diverse. Obviously, can let them talk in their own time. Okay, I think that's most of the notes I wanted to go through. Yeah, check it's recorded. Yeah, I mean, I think that's everything in my notes. So, please let me know if that makes sense. If I've missed anything, if you have any questions.
Right. Do we take their photograph?
Good question. Not something I've thought about until you just asked it. Why would we take their picture?
Archive. Well, I always take pictures. I do it automatic. I have a camera and I just take pictures all the time. If you go on my Facebook page, the wife and I chronicle where we go and what we do. It's I just take pictures. So the question is, can we take the picture?
Well, isn't the question possibly what's the purpose of the interview, rather than, you know, so is a picture necessary? Is it nice to have? Is it irrelevant? And that's kind of basically a function of how you set the project up. I'm not saying yes or no, Adrian. I'm just saying that for your purposes, a visual element is important. In this case, it might not be. So it's something I think for Abby to maybe think about.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's also something that people often, particularly with a stranger, I think things have changed perhaps, would recoil from, and I would worry in case it might potentially put a barrier in and make them feel a little more on the spot.
Yeah, I should imagine it depends what it says on the rider form, on the permission form, which we haven't seen yet. I'd see the permission form first.
Yeah.
And if it might mention photographs on there.
Yeah, I started drafting it, so I kind of wanted to wait until we've done these training sessions to see if anything, flagged up that we were missing. So let me take it to the impressions team and see what they say, because like Stephen says, it's what purpose in their project does that serve? I'm not saying it doesn't, just saying ask the question. So
Right. Another question. Are you always used to go to the concerts at the Gorman, the Alhambra and St. George's with my friend Bob? Now then, could I, if people want to be interviewed in twos or threes, say like, I went with Bob and Mary probably went with Irene and things like that all the time, and they're inseparable. Could that be done?
I think in our case, yes, because often I think with the memories that we're specifically looking at, like you said, they're usually collective. However, I think if you were doing, I think, all the way through, I was saying, like, if you were doing a different project, or you were doing like a full, if you were doing an oral history of someone's life story, then those are done individually. But I think in our case, I think it would probably be fine.
Good, yeah. Can I interview Mark Nicholson?
Ooh, good question. If he's happy to do that, then yeah.
Well, I'm in contact with him, and he's going to be very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping to, because he's got like not a personal archive, but like with him being a local historian, he's been working with Bradford Live, like I said on the podcast and things. He's kind of already amassed like quite a big collection of materials. So we're hoping that he will lend some of those to the exhibition as well. So yeah, if you want to interview him, that would be really cool because he knows a lot.
That's good.
But yeah, I think, and like just kind of on another note, yeah, hopefully he'll be contributing some of his collection to the exhibition as well.
Yeah.
But I think that would be something to I know he's got like loads and loads of stuff, so it'd be a case of like it might be that one or two is like have like a meeting with him and look through it and can like identify things that we might want. So I can look at setting that up as well.
Yeah, and also questions for Rui and Stephen. Do you know Carl Gresham, Garth Carewood, or?
I know the names through various people, shall I say, of your generation.
Yes.
So I don't know them personally, but they're names that I've come across.
Yeah, I'm just saying I've been in touch with them and they're willing to do interviews, especially Garth Carewood. And there's also Derek Lister. Have you heard of him? He's wrote several books about Bradford.
I've not heard of those people, no.
Oh, right. Okay. My generation.
There'll be several people who've been doing stints on BCB, Bradford Community Broadcasting, who will have been involved in that sort of thing in years past as well. Which I suppose is another potential source of information and shout outs.
Yeah, Carl Gresham has a BCP program every Sunday morning.
Yeah, I think my friend Martin has been involved with him on several occasions.
Yeah, that's my question.
Stephen, anything that I haven't covered or wasn't very clear?
No, not specifically. No, not at all. In fact, I'd hoped to just be able to look at the timeline you sent out the other day, but that's on another device which I don't have with me at the moment. But I'm sure you'll be updating us and inviting us to whatever you feel would be sensible and useful to go along to.
Yeah. Rui, anything?
No, not at the moment. Just interested in listening.
Cool. Okay, so what I think let me just double check because if not, I could do it. I've noticed that I make a little noise when I'm like filling in the time. I don't know if you can hear that. I don't know if the microphone picks it up.
Yeah, can I have a volunteer to interview me?
Yeah.
I think the chief inspector at Bradford Central Police Station might be interested.
Well, that'd be a good idea. Well, Stephen, what about you interviewing me?
Quite happy to do that. Yeah.
Very good.
Would you like to start now?
Well, we'll make an arrangement to do it at the Impressions Gallery. At the Impressions Gallery.
Okay, we'll just wait till we're familiar with the equipment and so forth.
Oh, that's good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's our first one. Great.
Once you've done any research, you'll be able to teach us how to use it, Adrian.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, you could give the next tutorial on that.
I will do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So I was just checking. So I've made a folder in the Google Drive. I don't know if anyone's looked at that yet. I know that Adrian has. So there's an oral story recording folder in there, which I popped in the PowerPoint that we were flicking through, my little how-to guide that I was referring to. And then also in there, there's a document called, it's a really terrible title, but I didn't name it, Aspects of the Effective Interview by Riv Davis. Riv Davis was the gentleman who did the training that I did. He's from the Oral History Society. So those notes are from his training as well. So there's a few things in there to refer to, but what I'm going to do is also make that crib sheet for using on the day as well. So I'll do that, and then I'll finish the permission form and share that with everyone to to go through, see if I missed anything, and also so you're familiar with it before we speak to anyone as well. And if there's anything that if you think of anything, anything that we haven't gone through or that would be useful to talk about, just drop me an email, and we can do that as well. So that was good. I said I was planning an hour and a half, and it's like it's now.
Oh no.
That's good. I should have given. We should have had a 5-minute break, but I think I just kind of plowed through. So sorry about that.
Well, I think you took your breaks as you know, as you went through, Abby.
Okay, cool.
You know,
Yeah.
a little coughing break.
Yeah, little coughing breaks.
Yeah.
I need to go have some more.
Excellent. I've enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
That's no problem. So like I said, anything, just give me a shout. But I'll be back in touch next week with the updates and things. And if you haven't been in the Google Drive yet, I'm kind of just dropping stuff in there as it comes in. So do have a look. So I was just saying to Adrian before you guys joined that we've been in touch with Christine, who is the assistant manager of the Origin just before it closed, and she's got the mirror ball in her basement.
Oh wow!
So I've got
Oh, wonderful. Star Wars again.
I know, right? So I'll pop a picture in the drive. I mean, it's literally just a picture of mirror ball, but it's quite exciting. And then hopefully we can go nab that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have that up on the ceiling.
Yeah.
During the interviews, yeah.
Might be a bit distracting, but it might set the tone.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'll let you go. I will.
Okay.
Hopefully this is recorded, and then I can send that on to those who were not able to attend. So I'll speak to you all soon.
Right, see you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.